Hey, thanks, Amy. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the workshop today. And speaking of GP to BC, it just happens to be one of my favorite things. I've got a little over 27 years in Dynamics Great Plains, but working with Business Central for the last 8, 9 years or so now, it's definitely been a great experience. It's been a fun journey and a lot of lessons learned and projects implemented over that time frame. But what I would like to do is share 10 of my favorite tips for helping somebody who's looking at maybe moving from GP to BC. Strong recommended considerations for you to get a successful project across the bow. My first one, I could probably, by the way, do more than 10. I could easily do 15, 20. But let's boil this down into simplistic fashion and let's start with one. Any great journey typically is done with a partner, with a friend, with somebody who can go through that experience with you. A partner, a business partner, especially for your ERP system, especially if you're coming from Great Plains, you're going to have had some history likely with that partner. Embarking on a new ERP implementation does require, obviously, a number of things that a partner should bring to the table. So you don't want to evaluate who might be the best partner for your implementation or migration in the future. So there are a lot of partners out there that do Great Plains, but not all of them do Business Central. Some of them may share or show other ERP solutions with you. But if you're looking at Business Central, and I highly recommend that you do, you're going to want to find a partner that knows it, that does it. So just because your GP partner did it doesn't mean that your BC partner does it, nor does it mean that you're really breaking up with your partner. The reality is that you're modernizing and you're automating and you're taking care of efficiencies for your workforce. So work with a good partner who's been that journey, who knows the pitfalls of how to get there. Now, the second tip I'll have for you is getting a good baseline, knowing everything that you have about your Dynamics GP environment is really, really important. One of the things I've spoken on many times over the years, and I enjoy doing, truthfully, is doing a Dynamics GP system audit. It's like speed dating your GP environment to learn about a lot of different things. What's installed, and that's compared to what's actually used. We do interviews with subject matter experts or some of the users on the team, with the administrator of the applications. So we get a good sense of any integrations or customizations, third-party products, special reports in SQL, all kinds of things are on our checklist to look for. Once we typically know what was available, and you can do this too, it gives you a baseline to start thinking about, okay, what do you need to move forward? Just because you have an ISV product in GP doesn't mean that you need an ISV product in Business Central. There's a lot of core functionality out of the box at Business Central that will ultimately play into your implementation project. So, point number 3, if you can, don't discount discovery. Like, don't assume that, oh, it's just GP in the cloud, because it's not. Business Central is a dramatically altered ERP system from what GP has and offers that you know and love right now. So don't discount what you do today for your workflow. Chances are you want to dig in a little bit on your quote to cash. You want to dig in on your procure to pay, on any of the, record to report, any of the other, I guess, elements of the business that are currently done in, around, or through Dynamics GP. What you did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when you implemented Dynamics Great Plains, chances are isn't what you want to do in the future. So at this pivotal moment in time, really understand the people doing the work now, the tools they use, the time it takes, the pain points that they live with that cause inefficiencies on a daily basis. You're really kind of pulling a lot of the weeds out of the yard and just making sure that you're going to able to grow in a nice, lush new surface in the future. So take the time it takes. We at GraVoc spend very early upfront time with multiple sessions doing discovery, taking great notes, making sure that we understand complex situations, and we also don't assume certain things that we really just want to make sure we cover all the bases for. You may have heard what we call the sure step methodology in dynamics in the past. Believe it or not, that is actually still around and does still apply today. Tip number 4, know what Business Central has to offer. You know what Great Plains does. You know how to use it, but what does Business Central give you and how does it deliver it? It's always a good idea to not just do the demo or to necessarily do the 30-day trial sandbox that you can get for free, but to also, when you're going through the project early on, really get to know the ins and the outs, how documents work, how journals work, where the key bearing points for your reporting requirements are going to come from. If there's functionality that Business Central offers that Great Plains doesn't have, then clearly that's a +1, where you can take a concept like reminders or collection letters and do that out of the box in Business Central. Maybe that makes it a little easier on the ISV load and your ongoing expense to maintain the event, the system moving forward. So get to know what it does, how it does it, and remember, Business Central sits on the Microsoft platform. So the interoperability that you're going to witness with Teams and Power BI and OneDrive and SharePoint and, oh my gosh, Outlook. Geez, there's so many places that you're just going to say, wow, this really does work and move and share information very efficiently across my team. But we got to get there, right? It's great to see and know what to expect, but the hard work comes when we really start to roll up the sleeves and we look at our data, right? Our Business Central environment is currently in a pristine state. I'm a big fan of trying to touch it once and be done, but I also want to leave it way better than I found it. So I'm a big fan of getting the GP data as clean as can be. Any implementation consultant will tell you, please focus on clean data. When you rework data or don't understand how things map from a legacy system into Business Central, such as item numbers, they're shorter in Business Central than they are in Great Plains. So there are considerations. It's not just a direct line of sight for certain situations. So how you map, transform, maybe you don't want to bring over 60,000 customers. You only want to bring on those that you've done business with over the last 5 years. So you have the idea. You get the idea is that you want to clean what you bring. Generally, we try to do one big master push to say, okay, this is our great baseline starting point for a sandbox. So we can seed Business Central with good, clean information that's going to use the business logic of Business Central because we've looked at it holistically and filled in places that GP doesn't have. We've converted it from the way GP works and thinks to the way that BC will work and think as well. Then when you get your data and it gets loaded into a sandbox, and I can't stress that enough, the sandbox environment for Business Central it's a neat thing. To compare to Great Plains, you have a server typically that hosts your GP environment. And that's typically only the production environment. When you try to build, let's say, a development or a quality assurance or a lower level server, if you will, to mimic the production environment, in Windows, installing Great Plains, dealing with network names, conventions, IP addresses, all of authentication, all of that stuff, it gets really difficult and it's time consuming and it's expensive. Not that many environments truly have a development Great Plains set of servers. So to have a production for Business Central plus up to 3 different sandbox environments allows you to take your clean GP data, load it into Business Central in a sandbox, learn it, train on it, use it to understand how it's going to work well for your business. You can always add new vendors, new items, and new customers right before going live, but try to curate that data set all the way to the point where we can push that into production. So it minimizes how many times you touch the data, potentially have an effect on change in the data set. Now, your goal is to try to make sure that your data cleanly makes it all the way to your new production environment so you have a great experience once you get there. I think my seventh tip is plan. All the best things that I can think of really require plans, not luck. ERP implementation is not a luck kind of event. So, developing a cutover plan requires a number of inputs and thought exercises depending on the level of complexity your company has. There's a spectrum. On the lower end, the easy end of the spectrum, you might be a low complexity environment where you're using maybe some general ledger, accounts payable, maybe some accounts receivable, maybe not. Maybe you're just using AP and GL, or maybe some banking. So on one end of the spectrum, you have some simplicity, a couple of companies maybe. You can go to the far end of the spectrum, and if your cutover plan requires that you take bill of materials and routings and things that were in process mid-stroke and move them from GP, convert them, load them into Business Central, and finish them off, that type of cutover is very intricate and does require some very deep thought. Maybe you want to finish some things in the old system and ramp up on the new system and just do some accounting for those unfinished things. Develop a cutover plan for each module, each type of transaction that you enter into to GP, ultimately to BC, such as when are you done doing your accounts receivable in GP? Maybe it's on like day 3. When are you done doing accounts payable? Maybe it's done on day 2. Okay, maybe banking is done on day 7, but write those down so that the team knows what data to pull out of Great Plains to send to Business Central to load up and carry forward. At the end of the day, it's important to have that written down, tasks and dates assigned. And one other comment about a cutover plan, I think it's important to note is a lot of folks are going to have open purchase orders, you're going to have open sales orders. They're going to have potentially some other things out there that need to make their way over. Don't assume that you can just take that information and just copy it over or push a magic button typically and make it show up in Business Central for go live. Typically, we want to practice that. Do a dry run, 60 days out to make sure that you have the right SQL scripts for getting the data out of Great Plains, that people can put that information in the appropriate templates. And we know how long data takes to load into Business Central so that on day 1, your folks will be able to see their open purchase orders and begin to receive those, and your open sales orders and begin to fulfill those. So a lot of considerations on that spectrum level of simple to complex, but definitely have a cutover plan. Don't assume just because the system's set up and people are on the meetings that they know exactly how to do their jobs, because they don't until they prove it to you. You have to provide adequate training, and there's a lot of ways to deliver adequate training for Business Central. There are in-person training events. There's the opportunity to do these remote trainings. We can train the trainer and they can train other people. You can do documentation. There's online training. We at GraVoc have a pretty nice gold standard that we rely on, where we do multiple meetings with the right people. We record them, we transcribe them. We use a reasonable amount of Copilot and AI to make sure that we have a maximum amount of information at the ready from our training events, because training needs to be revisited when you go to do it again sometimes. So having a resource library available to everybody on the Business Central team that includes training resources of a variety of types is really helpful. One item that we've had great key success with as well is having each end user perform what we call their user acceptance testing scripts. And let's say anybody who does the sales entry process will demonstrate through following the steps that they can enter, a customer, they can enter a quote, they can release the quote, they can walk it all the way through invoice fulfillment, post and send invoice. So knowing, how much of each of those process types and workflows you need definitely will get the right people, the right training, but then they have to prove that they can do it. So they can sign off on those UAT checklists, Another alternate approach is to use telemetry from Business Central. There's free telemetry capabilities that are automatically tracking user input, user activity, and usage in Business Central, such as running reports, opening certain pages like the purchase invoice page. You actually get empirical information to prove that people are doing the work and when they did it. So, a lot of tools available to help provide adequate training so that folks are fully set up and ready to train at least 30 days before go live. Don't wait longer than that. One key element of success for these implementations, big or small, is to have a dedicated project manager. And on the partner side, your partner would provide a good project manager that is able to herd all the cats, to book all the appointments, to make sure that the urgency of things is prioritized, that the right information flows. Right? There's a lot of things that a project manager has eyes on that individual role players may not. So communications, all managed through a project manager oftentimes. Reporting transparency through budget consumption is an important piece of communication from a good partner as well. You don't want to get to the end and find out surprise. So we should all be knowing about our burn rate throughout the project so that you get a sense early on if things are just taking too long, or maybe you're ahead of budget because you had great clean data. It loaded on the first try. People did all their user acceptance testing scripts. So maybe there's some really good things that will reduce your burn rate against a budget. So your project manager can help you understand where you're at in that and avoid the surprise. Amy, my last one today, my last hot 10 tips for doing a GP to BC implementation is plan for the future, right? This is one thing. The implementation, migrating GP to BC is one and done. But what happens after that? One of the things that we do as at GraVoc, which I think has worked very well for our customers, is to because everything's in the cloud now. Your server's in the cloud, your ERP is in the cloud. It's all managed in the cloud. That's the beauty of SaaS. Now, moving into a modern SaaS type of support model means people don't have to come on site. They don't have to plug in servers. There's a lot of things that don't happen anymore that really get offloaded to another, let's call it paradigm. There's another way of handling support in the cloud. And your partner generally is your first line of defense for a lot of that. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are plenty of tools available to help you as an end user understand how to do some troubleshooting, how to report errors and things that just don't look right, feel right, how to administer your copying of a live company to a test company, things like that. You'll certainly want to learn so you can self-administer as much as possible. But ensuring that when a project exits the go live phase or the hypercare phase for the first 2 or 3 weeks, usually after the go live date and time, that post live support should kick in. It oftentimes serves a whole variety of reasons. Number one is it helps reduce risk. You really know what you're going to pay essentially by having some level of managed support plan after the go live. Typically, it's a small fraction, a percentage of the total price, but you also know what you're going to pay. There's not typically a yo-yo type of thing there when you go to post-live support that way because it's managed. You're going to have some ups, you're going to have some downs. The first 3 or 4 months, you're going to have more support than the next 3 or 4 months. So things will change over time. The beauty of having post-live support lined up is that you can revisit that, right? If you're using less, maybe you can dial that down. If you need more after 6 months, by all means, you can ramp that up and pull more external support in. Should you need to from your partner, that's really what they're there for. So I appreciate the time, Amy, and ISV Society for allowing me to share a number of my GP to BC migration tips and tricks. I hope you find it well, and I look forward to any of the questions that we have and chatting with the rest of the presenters here shortly.
Amy, thanks again for the opportunity for arranging this today. My name is Zubin Gidwani. I'm the founder of Dynamic Budgets, and I'm going to walk you through our approach to migrations from GP up to BC. So I go and share my screen. and just walk you through a few slides and then a little bit about our product and bounce back and forth. Um, a lot of our customers are starting to transition from GP to various other ERPs, Business Central being one of them. Our application is a budgeting, forecasting, and reporting tool. What I'm going to walk you through today is a brief introduction to our application, talking to you about the process that we see and the opportunities that you have to bring your data with you from GP over to BC. Talk to you a little bit about the change process, about what we've seen for customers who struggle with opportunities to clean up the chart of accounts, how they are embracing dimensions and such. Really going to encourage you to test this as early as possible as you can with whatever tools you have available, whether it's something like dynamic budgets, a reporting system, or just flat out Excel or Power BI or whatever reporting tool you can latch onto. And then give you some advice about things that you can do to ease the transition for your staff by giving them some translation tables and giving them the mapping files in advance and during the process and embedding a little breadcrumbs as you go along. Okay, so in dynamic budgets, we're a budgeting, forecasting, and reporting solution built for Dynamics GP. We've been in business for about 15 years. Originally built the tool for GP, and now we've migrated the application and followed our customers as they've transitioned on to other cloud ERPs. We're talking about Business Central today, but I also wanted to let you know that we're also available on Sage Intacct, Acumatica, Oracle NetSuite, and some other ERPs. It's not uncommon for our customers to grow through acquisition, mergers, and sometimes they can actually bring in systems, integrate to multiple ERPs into our one product, and I'll show you a little bit of that today. What we are really all about is trying to encourage continuous improvement. We want you to budget initially. We want you then to kind of analyze your variances and then go into a reforecasting process. We want you to input itemized budgets, how much in which month and for what purpose. Don't just say I want 100,000 for the year for training, but who's going to which conferences, how often, for what purpose. Capture all that detail in the budgeting tool. Then you can run your monthly over-under variances analysis. Why was I over under this month? Do you think you can recover by year end? And next year, should we plan differently? Was that $40,000 unplanned expenditure in April for that maintenance event? Was that a new annual contract that we just entered that's going to have to be planned for next year? Or was that a one-off expense that should hold us by for the next 10 years? Capture those notes in the system, and then you can use those notes the next time you go into a reforecasting process or next time you go into the next year's budget. You can look to the bottom of our screens, see those notes, and then act upon those to make better informed decisions. We serve customers in all likes and sizes, mid-size enterprises, anywhere from 10 department nonprofit, largest customers over 30,000 cost centers. All walks of life, all types of industries. It's really the common theme are those that feel that they've really outgrown their patience and tolerance for budgeting in Excel and need better controls, more of a standardized interface, something that's easier to work with. What sets us apart from most other solutions? I was a frustrated customer who said it cannot take that long, be that expensive, and be that painful to work with. I need to roll this thing out to non-technical, non-financial end users with minimal training and just let them run with it. When I got quotes for 30 to 60 days of implementation, I just said, this is ridiculous. There's got to be a better way to do this. Couldn't find it, so we built a better mousetrap. One of the first things I did when I launched the company was change the business model. We have an unlimited user license. So if you saw 10 people were actively involved in budgeting, but another 30 people could use this for a reporting tool, great. The more the merrier. We want to encourage use, want people to embrace the application, embrace the financials, take ownership over the financials, and pay attention to them and monitor them. Let's talk about the GP to BC transition. The ugly truth is that your BC consultants prefer to just import about 2 years of account balances. They typically only lift the finger to import transaction data for the current partial open year. So all that 20 years of GP history, it typically goes away. Now, Tyler's going to follow me and talk to you about the PopDoc product and how they can transition and act as a data as a tool to help you archive that history and make it available through the BC interface. But there are other applications out there like our application, Dynamic Budgets, which offer you the ability to kind of seamlessly transition that data over. What our customers can do is that we can copy all the core financial tables from GP into our Dynamic Budgets application. Our customers are accustomed to entering their budgets in the top half of the screen, looking at the bottom half of the screen, see how much they spent last April, click into last April's $40,000 and see the transaction details. We make that a continuous process. They can carry that same behavior on over to BC. Yes, you can do that natively in the BC history, but what if you only have 2 years of BC history? We can add the additional 3, 5, 7, 20 years of history for those accounts at the bottom half of the screens. We've copied the data from GP. We'll apply your mapping, translate it over to the BC accounts and dimensions. They can simply click on the 5 years ago April number, drill down and see that transaction history right inside the dynamic budgets. So that's what we offer our customers. Copying the data from GP, there's different approaches, but most of your GP systems are old, tired, and IT wants to turn off the server. So if that was the case, what would you do? Well, you can replicate it to a new, shiny SQL server on a Windows box somewhere else in your network. You may already have a reporting server or something better and beefier that you could play with, and then you could just simply copy GP over to it. Or you might go ahead and move that to a Windows box on the cloud. But there's also something called an Azure SQL database. It's a standalone SQL Server database running in Azure. You don't need a Windows server. You don't need a SQL Server license. You can simply provision this standalone Azure database, and this could be as little as $15 a month. You may need to beef up the resources, and basically you can just pull a little slider switch and increase the performance of this at any point in time. So if it sits idle for 3 months and all of a sudden you've got an audit period or you need to run a bunch of financial queries and reports against it, you might just slide it up to $75 a month or $150 a month performance level, add a whole bunch of processing power to it, run all your reports against it, and then maybe drop it back down to $15 a month for your next idle timeouts. So a really nice, easy approach. There's other approaches that you may already have budgeting reporting tools available that can act as a data warehouse for you. Tyler's going to expand on this and talk to you about using data lakes. It's a new type of technology out there. It requires a little bit more dancing to play with. They've made it easy through their application, but you can also direct connect to it, but he'll go into those details. It could be as simple if you're going to copy the data from one SQL server to another, just using this set of scripts. It's in my slide deck. You can play with it later, but basically selecting from the old GP server into the new GP server, and away you go. So, accounts and dimensions. This is your opportunity for some spring cleaning. If you've been jumping through your management reporter reports and you've got a line item for sales, and sales is 4XXX through 4100 to 4999 minus 4500, because that 4500 account was petty cash because we accidentally put it in the middle of the sales account or discount or whatever the case may be. This is the time to fix those numbering issues that you've been dealing with over the years. It's also an opportunity to think about consolidations. If you've got too many accounts, you want to drop down to fewer accounts, or if you want to explode it out, if you've been getting by with dumping a whole bunch of things into one particular account and now you want to break that out into multiple accounts. take that opportunity to do it right. But there's also the new concept of dimensions. And what I want to caution you about are dimensions are a great opportunity. It's sort of like analytical account codes in GP. But if you want to keep in the back of your mind that you're only doing the bare minimum necessary to capture the transaction. You don't need to capture parent attributes that are associated with this. So a particular account is associated with a product line or a region or a X, Y, or Z, parent upstream categories and subcategories and things like that. You don't need to capture things that could be captured by a reporting tool. And I'll show you a little bit about that approach in dynamic budgets, but you leverage other tools for that. Think about this as from the old poor APAR GL accounting clerk. If they had to key the transaction into the system, you want to minimize the amount of things that they have to put in. I ran across one customer that had a GL account and they had 17, they had 6 segments in the GP segment, and they had an additional 12 dimensions in analytical accounting. It took them 18 widgets. They had to key in 18 bits of information to record a transaction. I said, how in the world do you do this, especially with your international offices? Oh, they said everyone faxes everything over to XYZ, so-and-so person in accounting, and she keys it in. And if she gets the flu, oh, everything comes to a grinding halt. Well, that's not appropriate for for your operations. So minimize your use of dimensions to key critical points, but try not to overdo it. The best thing I can do is advise you to search and report on this new structure, the new set of account codes, the new dimensions that you're trying to decide upon. Get that into some sort of reporting tool as quickly as possible. You'll have mapping files of old GP account number to new VC, GP, or GL and dimension equivalents. Take that mapping file, throw it against your financials, and then go search on it. Dynamic budgets is a great place. It's much faster and easier for us to load that data, let you play with it in our structures, things that are familiar to you, the way you slice and dice the data and filter and report and query. You could do the same thing in plain vanilla Excel, Excel pivot tables, Power BI. Get the data into a reporting tool as soon as you possibly can. Try to search for your transactions last year. Try to group this by your department or by your projects or by your sales manager or whatever dimensions you're playing with. Try to group and subtotal by those things and make sure that what you've decided upon supports what you think is going to work moving forward. Look for opportunities to try to give your staff breadcrumbs, and I'll show this to you in our application, how we can kind of translate old to new and give them the ability to run reports in either flavor. Even though they're in BC, they could run it in the GP flavor if they wanted to. GP history doesn't have to be a headache. It can be a tool. It can be a resource that you can very easily bring with you. You'll see that in our application, and you'll see that in the next presenter's materials as well. Okay, to request more information, my name is Zubin Gidwani. I'm the founder, but I'm going to ask you to follow up with Jennifer Moniz. She's our sales and partner channel manager. Here's her contact information, and let's just jump over into the application. Okay, over here, our typical data entry screens will look something like this. Again, we're a budgeting reporting tool, primarily a budgeting data tool. So what you would want to do is come in here and look for your accounts. We can start with a plain laundry list of accounts, or we can format this to look a little bit more like a P&L report with your categories and such. If I want to drill down, I can go ahead and drill down and look at my accounts. And at some point, I can go ahead and click into an account and itemize my request for my budget. I might come in, say, for my COGS, I've got fasteners, lumbers, and packaging, support of my cost of materials. And then down at the bottom half of the screen, I've got my history. Well, my history, I can go ahead and click in and see the transaction details from the system. It could be a BC system, or it could be a GP system. I can translate that data and have it coming back from GP and commingle that to make it look as if it was BC data right here at the bottom half of your screens. Another opportunity we have is that we can take this, and I talked about translating and making this easier for your staff. Well, if they don't recognize these formats, the old format that they used to work in was a GP format. I could come over here. I still have access to my GP data. And I could come back over here and look at the GP system, and that was 3 digits for the department, 4 digits for the natural account, the revenue or expense codes, and then they had a sub account 01 or 02. In certain cases, they would be using that, or it's 00. Typically when you move over to a dimensional system, if it's an occasional use segment, you might even drop that from our consideration, turn that into a dimension, and then sometimes use it, sometimes not. We're going to go ahead and come over here and say, okay, if we go back to my BC system, in fact, I could even have an intact and NetSuite systems commingled here, but I'm going to BC dataset. And over here are my 2-digit department codes, my 3-digit my division codes, department codes, 3 alpha, and then 5-digit revenue expense codes. I can turn on a GP to BC mapping over here and look at my BC financials in the old GP format, because that might still be more familiar to me. So if I wanted to click into one of these accounts, I could click into 4510. I could see that we took one account that had activity last year in the GP system, and we've exploded it out and broken out that budget now across multiple accounts in the BC side. Or it could have been in the reverse. I might have had multiple GP old accounts now mapping into a single BC account, vice versa. But you can provide this mapping just by simply turning on a row format. Now, how did I accomplish that? What we did was we had the master chart of accounts for BC, and we tagged these BC account codes with the old GP account equivalents. And I could either run a report by using this reporting tag, or I could use that reporting tag, or this original account number, or my account categories, or whatnot. But that's how we kind of embed the mapping file in our system, and then be able to use this to cross talk whenever we want to. Now, for the GP folks out there, we've added in a bunch of new features to embrace dimensions. You can come over here and associate a dimension, turn on a dimension for a particular set of accounts. So in this example, I had a project dimension, and I wanted to associate projects with revenues and COGS. And I wanted to associate with commissions and my T&E. But I didn't need to associate with my G&A accounts, so I left that blank. So when you go to click into an account number, it will only prompt you to enter a project code when you're in a project-related account. It won't prompt you to enter it where you don't want it. Because I'm of the mindset that if you present your staff with a bucket, they try to put dollars into buckets. And if you don't want them putting the dollars in that bucket, don't offer it to them. Shame on you. So we can control which accounts have associated dimensions. We've also added the ability to do parent and child relationships, or what they call dimension restrictions. So even if you have not enabled this in BC, you can enable it in our application. So if for training, you might have 100 different employees in your system, I built a relationship between project and employee where I only want the IT staff to be associated with training expenses. For whatever reason, I just limited it. And then I really only these 3 employees, IT employees, are qualified to do server upgrades. So I only associated those 3 with the server, with the project code server upgrade. For internal audit, I'm using the financial staff. I'm not even allowing any of the IT staff to participate in internal audits. That's only the finance staff. So I can associate different dimension values with each other. So kind of restrictions in there. The last thing I wanted to show off about dimensions, there's lots of ways that we can play with these, but then what if you have one single drop down for project codes, and you only want the marketing staff to see the marketing codes, only the IT staff should see the IT codes, and only the maintenance staff should see their maintenance codes. You can associate employees to codes, and when they click the drop-down menu for project, that they will only see their own relevant codes, and they won't have the opportunity to choose the wrong code and make a mistake. So that's a little bit about us, some tips and tricks and advice about transitioning from GP, bringing your history over. We can certainly dig a lot deeper into the new systems and the new features and things like that. But really just wanted to kind of open your eyes, and it gives you some things to think about as you prepare for that transition. So thanks very much for your time, and I'll yield back and let Tyler talk to you about archiving the entire GP data set and mixing and matching that with other systems.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler with E1 Solutions. Here to talk to you today about smarter GP to Business Central migrations with our tools here at E1 Solutions. So today we're going to look at our migration strategy at E1 Solutions and how it can be applied to really any Dynamics GP migration to Business Central, or really any data migration scenario in general. The goal from our strategy is really to simplify the overall migration process. This includes our approach to moving master data and opening balances into Business Central. Additionally, a really big focus of our migration strategy is to provide customers with full access to their historical data without having to leave Business Central and without having to migrate all of that history into Business Central. This would also include granting access to all of your historical smart lists from GP embedded or displayed right inside of Business Central. And lastly, we're going to showcase how PopDoc can provide life-to-date reporting that combines data from your GP history and live Business Central data. Now, when we talk about migrations, and it's been brought up multiple times here today, there's really a few different classes of data that we identify as really a part of any migration scenario. And this is not only for a GP to BC migration, but really applies to any migration. So it could be a CRM migration or a project management system migration. The first class of data that we always talk about is master data. This is all of the occasional maintenance items that drive transaction entry. So think your customers, your vendors, your items, really anything you need to drive transactions in your new system. The second category is opening balances. These are all of the things that give the new system its starting point. So think your GL balances, your unpaid receivables and payables, your unshipped sales orders, really everything you need to transact against once you've made that migration into the new system and as you go forward. And the last big bucket is really a big one, historical data. Historical data is basically everything in the old system that feeds into all the reporting that drives the decision making. So think of really every transaction that isn't open and all of the detail that goes along with it. Really, it's anything from the past that, as you can see, you need to look up, but you aren't necessarily importing or moving that into your new solution like Business Central. So where does E1 Solutions fit in? We have two different products that really handle both components of migration. Starting with master data, that's where our product Smart Connect comes into play. Smart Connect is our traditional integration tool used to essentially move data between applications. And we use Smart Connect and the Excel add-in with Smart Connect to essentially allow users to clean and prep their master data like their chart of accounts, the customers, vendors, items. So if you're going through and taking the process to cleanse that data, maybe you're updating account structures, we give you the ability to do that directly in Excel. And then from there, using our Excel add-in, we can push that data into Business Central using, again, the Excel add-in for Smart Connect. The benefit is it gives an immediate feedback response. It tells you of any errors, and it then allows you to go and quickly reprocess things in the event that there are any error messages. This really makes the process about 70% faster than a traditional configuration package. When it comes to opening balances, Smart Connect also comes into play. Smart Connect handles the opening balance integrations. So your GL, your open payables and receivables, your bank balances, and more. It connects directly from GP to Business Central, ensuring that your transactional starting point is accurate and automated. This is a key to being able to really transact it again immediately post your go live. And then the last kind of category and where our tools fit in is utilizing PopDoc for historical data. And this is what I'm going to really focus on for the remainder of this presentation. And then I'm going to show you some examples inside of Business Central of PopDoc interacting inside of the BC experience. But when it comes to historical data, rather than migrate that entire data set into Business Central, which can be very costly and very time consuming, we have a couple different options of how we can connect to that historical data. Most commonly, we see people push that into a data lake, and then PopDoc gives you the ability to embed real-time queryable lists directly into Business Central. This gives users fast access to their history and all that historical detail without necessarily having to clutter or slow down Business Central. Now, when it comes to accessing history, you really have a couple of different options. And in all of these options, PopDoc can connect to all of these scenarios. The first option is leave it where it's at. And oftentimes in migrations, we see this sometimes as a starting point for people. Maybe they don't want to implement another solution while they're trying to implement BC. So initially, we can set up a direct connection to their GP environment and then access their historical data embedded in Business Central directly from a SQL or a GP connection. As you can see, this would require us to be able to access directly from the current SQL server. Now, oftentimes in migration scenarios, typically people no longer want to continue maintaining that they have that on-premise server or on-premise GP environment on, so they don't want to continue maintaining that on-premise server. Which is then we have a couple different alternative options. One of them would be moving to an Azure SQL instance. This would be you would access data from Azure hosted SQL or a serverless SQL. It would still maintain a lot of the SQL format and queryability. But it would be kind of an intermediary in terms of expense between leaving it and then moving it to a data lake. At the last option, what you're seeing, and probably one that we see, jumped a little fast there. Probably the one that we see most commonly is people no longer want to continue maintaining the server on, and so they utilize a data lake as essentially the repository for all of their history. This is and if you're not familiar with what a data lake is, think of it as cost-effective blob storage that sits in the cloud. It can really hold any type of data, but we have a tool that essentially can assist with extracting data out of GP, converting your smart list tables and views into CSV files, and then pushing up into a data lake that you would provision. The big benefit with data lakes is they're extremely cost effective. We see about for people using data lakes, if they have about 1 terabyte of data, it comes out to about $22 a month in storage costs. So you can see it's probably the most cost-effective option of the three that we're presenting here. But again, I'll reiterate, in terms of PopDoc being able to connect to that history, PopDoc does have the ability to connect to data in all of these three scenarios. So I had mentioned this before. For those that are moving their data to a data lake, we have our PopDoc Data Lake Upload tool, which would be part of your PopDoc subscription. What this tool does, there's a couple of different processes that we can run for GP. One of them would copy your smart list. The other would copy any tables and views. It would extract the data out of those smart list tables and views, convert it into a CSV file, and then push it up into a data lake that you would provision. Now, you'll notice that it does give you the ability to move any third-party data, as well as any of the standard data from that GP database. So if you're using any ISV products or custom extensions, the tool does give you the ability to move all of those. And then you'll notice at the very bottom, we have a couple different options of data lakes that our tool can push to. Most people, I would say, push it to an Azure data lake, especially if you're one that is moving to Business Central. But we do also have the ability to move it to an Amazon S3 storage bucket as well. And then this is really just a diagram that kind of shows the process. So we're taking that GP data, we're using our tool to push it to a data lake, and then using PopDoc, we're able to query directly from that data lake and surface any of your historical lists inside of Business Central. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I am going to jump into a demo and really show you what the experience would look like inside of BC. So inside of Business Central, you can see at the very top here, we have this PopDoc tab. What this is in PopDoc terms is what we call a multiple list widget. So as the name suggests, it is a widget that contains a bunch of different lists. You get to control what list you want displayed in here. So you can see out of the box, it actually comes populated with a bunch of default queries that we would have for or connecting to your Business Central data. A lot of these default queries will mimic a lot of the standard smart lists that you would have experienced inside of GP. So out of the box, you'd have some financial-based list, fixed assets, inventory, project, purchasing, sales, a lot of those standard modules. We get you started right away. But then you can also see that we have some groups of data that are pointing to data sets that don't live inside of Business Central. So we have a handful of groups that are pointing to data from a CRM system or a Salesforce environment. We got data coming from a couple of e-commerce platforms. And then we got a bunch of these migration groups where we've taken historical data or either connecting directly to the on-premise server, as you're seeing with this group, or we've moved that historical data and moved it to a data lake and then are allowing users to go in and query list of data when they need to see it. So I'm going to select one of my historical GP lists. We'll pick the payables transaction list here. Again, this data is sitting in a data lake, so it's not, we're doing a live query whenever you need to look up this list. It's doing a live query for this list into your data lake and returning the results. Now, there's a lot of functionality that's built into this interface that makes working with the data very easy. A lot of people compare PopDoc to really the third generation of smart list, with obviously the big difference is we're no longer limited to just working with GP data, but we can work with data from a variety of different systems. So this list, despite it being a historical GP list and not living here, we really can provide the exact same experience as a list that we might be querying directly from this Business Central environment. So things that users can do on the fly pretty easily. They can go in, they can select which columns they want to add. PopDoc would then go re-query the results to grab those additional fields. I can just as easily remove columns from my list. Within this interface, everything's drag and drop. So if I wanted to move document date to the front, I could drag it on over. I can also do like grouping. So if I wanted to group my payables transactions by vendor name, anytime that we do a grouping, all of the groups are expanded by default. You'll notice for all of the groups as well, you would have subtotaling by group. And then you do have the ability to collapse them as well, just to see more groups within your screen real estate. And then from there, individually expand groups or expand them all if you want to see everything as well. And you can have multiple levels of these groupings. So if I wanted to group by vendor ID, subgroup by document type, from there you can drill into the lowest level of groups to see those records. From this interface, filtering is another big thing. Coming from SmartList and GP, you might be used to this 4 filter limit. PopDoc gives you the ability to have as many filters as you want in any of your lists. You can mix ands with ors. So a lot of power in terms of being able to ask questions of your data. Oftentimes with the filter, you might be working around a date field. And just to show you a ton of different restriction types to work with, so you might be using a between if you wanted to filter on a date range. We do also have relative date filters, so if you wanted to filter on yesterday's or last week's transactions, you don't necessarily have to define that date range every single time. But once you've gone through this modal and selected what filters you want to apply, you can hit save, and then PopDoc again would go re-query whatever the source of this data was to return back those fields with that filter criteria applied. From there, you can see a couple of additional buttons at the top of this example. Favorite, we give you the ability to create favorites off your list. This is very similar to Smart List favorites inside a GP. Favoriting a list is going to save your list configuration. So any columns you've added or removed, any filters you've applied, the order that you have your fields in, so that you can go back and access that version of your list at any time. You don't necessarily have to recreate it every single time you want to see it. And then you can share those favorites with other users as well. The other button I'll point out on this example, export, if you're someone that prefers working with their data in Excel, very easy to export any of these lists out to Excel. So as I mentioned, from this drop-down menu, you really get to select what list you want to display from any of the connectors you've added lists from that you would have set up inside of PopDoc. So I can very easily change the view from a BC list to a historical GP list. Now, I did talk about a little bit of the life-to-date reporting options that PopDoc provides. Inside of our web application, which I'm not showing you here, we can build out custom lists that allow you to combine data sets that might be pointing to two different places. So this is a very common example of a custom list that we see in migration scenarios, where people want to see a combined view of their GP historical data that's either sitting in GP or sitting in a data lake with their live Business Central data. So in this example, this is what we call a merge list. We've merged together a sales line items GP list with a sales lines list in this live Business Central environment. You'll notice on this source connector column, this is the column just basically tells us where these records live. So you'll notice the whole first page is showing live BC data. But if I jump over to the second page and scroll down, as I get further down here, you'll notice that we start returning records from a GP environment. So when it comes to your historical data, I usually like telling people that if you need to see historical smart lists as is, our tool can pick those up and make them available embedded right inside of BC. But if you do need to take that one step further, and if there's any need to provide some more life-to-date views of history combined with ongoing data inside of Business Central, then that's something that PopDoc can help facilitate as well. Now, I want to show one other example just to show another place where we can embed these PopDoc interfaces inside of BC. So I'm going to jump over to a customer card for this example. When I scroll down on this customer card, you're going to notice there's this additional detail fast tab. And inside of it, what you're seeing is another one of these PopDoc interfaces. We call them PopDoc widgets. This is a single list view. So it's just showing me one list, whereas that other example was more of a multi-list view, and I could change the view that's being displayed. This one's always showing me the same list of data, but when we embed these on different pages, we can actually pass in context. So you'll notice that the records that are being returned on this list are specific to the customer card that I'm on. And this is, again, pulling data from two different places. So we got historical sales lines coming from a GP environment, as well as sales lines from this Business Central environment, and it all is specific to the customer that I'm on. So just wanted to show another example in addition to working with that multi-list view where you can change what view of data you want to see, whether that be a historical GP list, a BC list, something from another connector. This is another alternative approach of how we can present data right inside of Business Central and provide more context to whatever page that we're embedding them on. So those are a couple of the examples that I wanted to highlight here today. Hopefully you get an idea of kind of where PopDoc fits in terms of being able to handle all the different classes of data, and then also becomes a really great solution for being able to access historical data via PopDoc embedded right inside of Business Central.